I think I think we might be jump ahead to question 3 on the list, because I think it kind of fits into that when you talk about communication and that now, our season was ended prematurely as we were preparing for our regional final, which in Ohio was an Elite Eight game, and we had a team that had 8 seniors this year, and was ranked #1 in the state and had aspirations for winning a state championship. So it was a bummer and it was abrupt, but it has brought us to the off season, which is where we're in now, although a little bit different standard as we're still kind of all stuck at home. But I think the next topic we can get into is how do you approach off-season workouts, and maybe we can talk about on an individual basis and also as a team, and maybe we can get into a little bit of what the rules are as far as what we can do as a team in the off-season, and then segue that as briefly as we can into sort of a season-long approach. And if any of you have happened to hear, and Edwin's probably heard, and Edwin and I might remember sort of a different philosophy from when we played, but certainly as the season goes along, things tend to get more focused and more condensed for us, and that's very deliberate to try to, keep our kids' attention, keep them focused, and also be productive and efficient with the time that we use. So I'll hand it back over to Coach Flannery, but, starting with the off season, what the process is to deal with the kids as individuals and a team, and then looking forward to the season.
Yeah, I think the first thing you need to understand is we have pretty strict rules in our state for what we're allowed to do, especially in the off season. So we're limited. When our season ends, we have a dead period for 30 days where we're not allowed to have any contact with our players, other than just talking to them. You can't have them in the weight room. You can't work with them. Anything basketball related, you can't do. After those 30 days are up, we have basically the month of April, May, because we're playing until the end of March. So the month of May is pretty much just open gyms. And
whoops, hold on. I muted the wrong
got
guy.
it. So in May, we kind of get into we have open gyms, which is just free play. And we get into our actual workouts, and I'll get into that in a minute. In the summer, in June and July, we're only allowed 10 days of actual instruction where we can be with our team and either coach them in a game or practice or do whatever you want with them for 10 days. So if you went to a tournament on a weekend with your team, you're allowed that in June, but that would count as 2 or 3 days if you spend that time with them, and now you're only allowed 7 other days. And if I meet with a group of guys for whatever reason, that would count as one of my days. Now, recently they made an exception that you're allowed to work out groups of 4. So if I had 4 kids that I wanted to do drill work with and stuff, I can do that as often as I want during those months as well. Then August is another dead period where we're not allowed to have any contact. And then we get back to school in September and October. And that's kind of our preseason again, where we get back to open gyms. We're not allowed to have structured practices or things like that. We can do the 4-person workouts. We can do open gyms, but that's it. And where we've come, I think the first thing I want to stress here too is I'm a big believer in time off and time away as well. I think we have so many kids nowadays that specialize in just basketball. Which is one thing I don't encourage our guys to do. I think they should play multiple sports when possible. I think it's just good for them. It's good for their bodies. It's good for us as coaches. But some coaches think like, hey, I got to grind. And I think really if you spend some time away from your players, it refreshes a lot of things. Us as coaches, we need that break at times to just kind of get away and take a deep breath. I think the players, if they see that you can take some time off, I think they feel that maybe, hey, they can rest a little bit. But most of them typically don't. I mean, they want to play constantly. And we're fortunate now here at our school where we have basically a workout fitness guy. And he's at our school full time. He works with all the sports, so he's not just a basketball guy. He's a full-time guy. And he works with our guys, and he puts them on a regimen, basically 3 days a week of lifting, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Other than August, and they're still allowed to get in the weight room as long as I'm not there. Outside of that, they're constantly in the weight room. They do a lot more of that type of training, where back when Edwin played for me and Tim, it was a lot more running and just doing a lot of, mile times and things like that, where today it's a little bit more structured into a lot of lifting and a lot of explosion and a lot of core things that are kind of specific towards our players.
It's been well over 20 years where I had the opportunity to be with you. Believe me when I say that those training regimens are legendary. I still have nightmares of what we did back then. So I'm very happy that it's changed. And I just remember those cold winter days in Cleveland, running the mile, and then the 400s, 6 200. Max, I can tell you all the rundowns.
Yep.
So
You got
I'm
it.
very happy. I'm very happy. But our group of guys, we needed that too to get tough. So yeah, I'm happy that everything has transitioned, and that's a very important point that you made, Coach Flan, in terms of the having a player to play multi-sports. We see that a lot also here in Puerto Rico, in the sense that we have a lot of players that just play volleyball, just play basketball, and the amount of chronic injuries have gone up drastically. So it's very interesting to hear that coming from St. Ed's, knowing that in all sports we're top in the state. So very good point on that.
Yeah, and to follow up, a lot of people, again, if they don't know, they assume like, hey, when you come to our school or you're talking to me, it's all about basketball. And if I'm coming there, that's what I have to do. And when we sit down with them and they understand like, hey, Coach Flan wants me to play soccer or football or wants me to play baseball, I just think that gets a little more buy-in from the families too, that they understand and they appreciate, that you're willing to adapt to other things and allow kids to do, I tell guys all the time, I played 4 sports when I was in high school. I played football, basketball, baseball, and I was on the golf team. And I'm a hypocrite if I'm going to tell kids today not to do the same thing. Now, on that same note, nowadays, a lot of kids on their own and their families, they choose to focus on one sport. And we do have a lot of one sport athlete guys, guys that I think that are, probably scholarship when going back to Division I, Division II. If they feel like they need to work year round on this in order to receive that scholarship, then we'll have that conversation. And that's part of the conversations that we have with them ongoing. Like, hey, you might need to give up a sport just so coaches can see you, just so you can kind of get a little bit better, get a little bit stronger, and focus on this sport if it's something that we see that you can, go on and play down the road. So that's definitely one of those conversations that you have that's unique, kind of person to person in that situation. But I don't know if there's if anybody has like a specific question on the off season stuff, or if there's, something that somebody might want to know about, what we do preseason or postseason, if there was something more specific on that.
How about maybe generally on practice time and just
so that's a totally different, but part of our season, I think it's a great question. So where we're at, and I'm a big believer you have to be really efficient with your time as a coach. And I heard a coach tell me this, I think it was a year or two ago. As a matter of fact, Don Showalter, who's my mentor with USA Basketball and has been the head of USA Basketball, he mentioned this to me once, and I took it to heart. He said, coaches don't, players don't have bad practices, coaches do. And I really, really kind of, bought into that philosophy the last 2 years of when I'm looking at my team and we're having a bad practice because the energy's not high, or your practice plan wasn't that good, or something interrupted the practice. And typically, maybe in my younger days, I would sit there and get mad at the kids and get mad, like, why are you guys not, you're having a bad practice. But when I've refocused that mentality to me, like, what am I doing as a coach to make us have a good practice? That's when our practices, I think, consistently have been a lot better, where I sit back and say, all right, this is why do I think that we don't have a lot of energy today? Well, it's my job then to get on the guys to bring up the energy if that's what I feel is lacking. Did I design a bad practice today, and that's why it's kind of going sideways. It's my job to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I think, you know, it may not be true 100% of the time. There might be a kid that just has a bad day and it's hard to get him out of that funk. But if you believe that as a coach, that, hey, these kids aren't the ones that are having bad practices, it's up to me to make sure that we have a great practice, then that really changes your mindset as a coach going into every practice. Like, this is my job and my responsibility to make sure that the energy's good, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But as far as practices throughout the season, you know, our typical practice is pretty well organized. And just to kind of, you know, break it down for you, what we do on a typical day, and something a little bit new that we've done the last few years, the first thing we always do is we have a team meeting. And we meet in my office for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It all depends on kind of what the kids want and where the conversation goes. And we'll do something like put up what we call mind candy. We'll put up a quote on the board. We'll watch a little bit of film. And with that quote, what we put down is, it might just be something philosophical. It might be something about life. It might actually be something about basketball. The kids will write it down in a notebook, so they take notes, so they keep this journal throughout the season. And what I'll do is I'll just ask them to read the quote and share what it means to them. You know, like one of my favorite quotes of all time is, it takes a lifetime to build your reputation, but it takes one moment to ruin it. So if that's the quote of the day, the kids will write that down on their notebook, and then they'll talk about what that means to them. And I think what that does is that strikes up conversation. It builds communication. It gets kids comfortable to talk in front of each other. And it's really good. And I think it also, I've had more kids since I've done that say that we as coaches have impacted them more off the court than on the court, because of just these conversations that we've had as a group and as a team before practice. And what I've always found too, like back when Tim and Edwin played for me, I remember, like, I would just like run up to the gym and we'd start practice, or maybe I'd bring the guys in and we'd get together and say, like, okay, this is what we're going to do, or give them a message and go. Where I found, if we meet down in the office or somewhere separate, it gives us time to kind of go over the plan for today, kind of get their minds right. And then as they're walking to the gym, they may run back to their locker and put their notebook away. It gives them a little time to process and kind of get ready for practice. And so when we come into practice, our practice is kind of broken down. We do skill work right away. So our first 10 minutes is kind of getting loose. Our coaches will have coaches with the bigs, coaches with the guards. We might even run through some shell, you know, out of bounds stuff and review some stuff just to get our guys moving, get them playing a little bit, focus on footwork, get some shots up, and then we'll stretch. So we'll take a few minutes to kind of get stretched and kind of know that we're going to get focused into practice. And then our practice time from there is getting back to what Tim said. If this is early season, that the practice time from after we stretch till when we end is probably about an hour and a half. And in that hour and a half, a lot of it is you know, transition stuff, to defensive stuff, to offensive stuff, to team stuff. And I've changed that even a little bit, where we actually play a lot more in practice than I ever has as a coach also. Where we do what we call, which I think is really good, we do what we call 4-minute segments, which the 4-minute segments are designed for our kids to play as hard as they can for 4 minutes. And we don't stop it as coaches. So what I mean by that is, our first, you know, 15 minutes of practice, we might be doing some transition drills, you know, 3-on-2, 2-on-1, you know, things we call like the fire drill, UCLA drill. We'll do a lot of, you know, recognition stuff, things like that. And then what we'll do is, for 4 minutes, we'll put 4 minutes on the clock, put them into 2 teams, and we'll let them play. And then they just play, they get going up and down. And if they're just not playing as hard as they should be playing, is when we'll maybe stop it and just say, you're not playing hard enough, and then we'll move on to the next drill or whatever. So we'll then break it down that way. So maybe we'll go into an offensive segment for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll play for 4 minutes. And it gets them in the habit of playing as hard as they can for as long as they can. And the reason we do 4 minutes is that's about a half of a quarter. We play 8-minute quarters up here where we play. So if we can get them to, condition-wise and mentally, play as hard as they can for 4 minutes, then maybe as the season goes on, we can move that to 5 minutes or 6 minutes. But we also make the point to the guys like, listen, if you can't go as hard as you can for 4 minutes that the clock is running, how do you expect me to play you in a game more than 4 or 5 minutes at a time? So you got to prove it here in practice. And it also gives the guys it's fun because they love to play. And two, it gives them some freedom to just go out there, and we're not allowed to stop it. Like I said, as coaches, we just kind of let them play, and then we bring them in and talk about, what they did after. So our practices are about an hour and a half. At the end, always, we finish practice with about 10 minutes of drill work, no matter what. So we'll go back and split up again with our guards and post, and we'll get some shots up typically. We'll work on some footwork, whatever it is that we felt like we need to work on that particular day or that part of the week. And so what we do then, typically as our season goes on, our practices by design get shorter and shorter. And so if we're in tournament time or we're 2 months in, our practices, we might come up and do that 10-minute work where we're still working on our skill stuff, a 5-minute stretch, and then practice from there might only be 35 to 45 minutes tops. So we're going hard for 35, 40, 45 minutes. And then we'll finish off again with 10 more minutes of some skill work, making sure we get shots up and things like that. So the entire time, it might be an hour and 15 minutes, but our focused practice time is about 45 minutes where we're working on our stuff. And it might be a little bit more time if we're putting in a play or adding some things that way. But we typically will do that in the meeting and then come up and review it real quick even before practice starts. And then we'll throw it in. So now going back to those 4-minute segments, we might call out like the play that we just put in as they're going live so they can kind of figure it out. And then we kind of break it down from there. So there's so many different ways I can go with practice and talk about different things that we do in practice. But just to kind of what Tim was saying, as the season goes on, we definitely concentrate our practice and we break it down where it becomes less and less time as the season goes on.
Now, you alluded to it. We got a question in the chat from Coach Carlos Martinez, who asked, "Is it okay to to coach skills as well as sort of coach your team at the same time?" And Coach Flannery has maybe the largest high school staff in the country, so we'll talk about that. But yeah, and you talked about it a little bit. But as far as in season focus, there's still a focus on skill development. We're fortunate in that, we have some coaches on our staff who can, work on specific skills, whether it's guards, whether it's bigs, ball handling, conditioning, strength and conditioning, like Coach mentioned. But maybe just touch on that real briefly, Coach, as far as particularly in season, how we still manage skill development, even though there's a lot of team focus. And Coach Carlos, if I didn't ask that correctly, please let me know.
Well, let's just go back to what I said about building a program. Your job and our job as educators and coaches is to teach. And if you're not teaching constantly, then we're not doing our job. And part of teaching is working on those fundamentals constantly. And so that's why I build and I put in my practice the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes to make sure that I don't get sidetracked in between of working on the fundamentals. And so 20 minutes a day, no matter what, we are working on fundamental stuff. We're working on footwork. We're getting shots up. We're doing different things, but also pretty much designed in our practice, depending on, what it is our focus is possibly for that day. We're breaking it down and we're working on fundamental skill things. And what you think is a fundamental skill thing as a coach may not be this. Like I think personally, reading a screen, or learning how to defend a ball screen, or learning how to come off a ball screen, to me is fundamental basketball, and that's important to teach. So we'll break that down and teach that quite a bit just in the middle of the practice. So we'll teach to ice a ball screen, to jam a ball screen, to double a ball screen or blitz it. We'll hedge it. We'll teach them all of these things throughout the year, maybe 6 different ways to defend a ball screen. Now, we won't necessarily use those during the season, but we know that our kids are prepared if we ever need to. Like, here comes tournament time and we're playing a guy that killing us on a ball screen and we need to blitz it or double it. So our kids have been working on that all year, so they know that they can do that. I think, you're doing a disservice to your kids if you're not constantly one, teaching them, you know, how to play the game, and two, not continually working on their skill set throughout just to make them better players. Does that answer that? Good. Okay.
We got
The electronic thumbs up. Nice. Like that.
Anything else on that, or maybe we get to the next topic? I think we're about 40 minutes in, and no one's sleeping yet, at least that we can see. So that's good.
It's all the guys that we can't see their faces. They got a nice cold beer in their hand, and they're like chilling, and they're probably playing video games or something. That's cool. I get it. What was the next one, Tim?
I think that segues into, you know, building a coaching staff, and in the email, you know, why is it important to have a good coaching staff? I guess that assumes you have a good staff, which is probably debatable, but,
Right.
But yeah, and, you know, we've talked about this and you've touched on it, but kind of your philosophy in building a staff, you have hangers on like me that just never seem to go away, but we've also fortunate to have guys that want to help out, that put a lot of time and energy in it. So why don't you just kind of talk about your philosophy and how you manage that?
And just so you guys know, this is Jack Daniels in here. This is how you get through coaching for a long period of time and you deal with everything. And this quarantine. Yeah.
Coach, it's very important to understand that we as Puerto Ricans, we can relate to you directly. And the only thing is that we might change it with a little bit of Danku and Bacardi, but very good.
It's all good stuff, man. Whatever gets you through the day, right? Getting back to the coaching staff, here's what I'm going to say about that. You know, I've been very fortunate too. I have 12 assistant coaches, but we have 4 teams. So we have the varsity team, which is like the senior team. We have a JV team, which is like our I think you guys would be like U16 type team. And then we have 2 freshman teams, which is our youngest group. So we keep 2 of them. So we'll get about anywhere from 65 to 90 kids to 100 kids that try out for our basketball program when they come to our high school. So that's what we start with, and we cut it down to 2 teams. So we'll get like 13 and 13 on each of our freshman teams, and that'll move up to like 14 kids we'll keep on our JV team, and then our varsity team we keep anywhere between, let's say, 13 and 15. So, you know, first and foremost, here's my number 1 rule if you're going to coach on my staff. I have to trust you. It's all about trust. It's all about, I have never hired anybody that I didn't know, you know, kind of blindly, even if they got some great reference. I've been fortunate over and I should, you know, maybe when I first started, I may have hired a guy or been with a guy once or twice that I didn't know that well. But I've always felt like I wanted to build a relationship with somebody before I actually put them on staff. And so the majority of my coaches are guys that I've built a relationship with somewhere along the way. Coaching X's and O's, to me, the X and O part is probably down the list of 4 or 5 as importance. If I can trust you, if you're good with the kids, like, you know, you can relate to the kids, and you're, you know, you got a great personality that way, that's extremely important to me. And then obviously if you work hard, if you're somebody that's doing it for the right reason, you're going to put some time into it, and you understand that this is time consuming. My coaches, I may have a lot of coaches, but we literally, I think we all make about 20 cents an hour if you break it all down, if that. I mean, nobody makes any money in our program as far as that goes. Tim helps me out quite a bit, and he doesn't get paid at all. So I do have a few guys that just volunteer their time because they want to be around, which is awesome. So when I'm building a staff, or when I have the guys' trust and getting to know them is really important. But I also give and make sure that everybody has a role, and everybody kind of understands what their role is. And I'm sure you've all heard it before, and there's a lot of truth to it. We don't want yes men. We don't want people that are just going to agree with everything you say and they're your buddy and whatever. We want guys that are going to kind of challenge you as a coach and make sure that you're doing it, you know, doing what you think is right and asking questions, and you know, those types of things are really important. So the one thing I think I've learned as a coach from way back when to now that's helped me a lot is I've really, really learned to delegate. And I've gotten over the fact that I'm not lazy when I do it. You have to get over that. I think that some people may think like, hey, if I tell Tim to do all the, analytics stuff is what he's great at, doesn't mean I don't want to do it. It just means that he's really good at it. And he's going to help me become a better coach and help our team become better players. So I have 4 guys that are just on my staff, and one guy's basically a skill guy. So he'll work with the skill work and work with, so after practice, if kids want to get up extra shots and work on some things, I have a guy that sits around after practice and he works with the guys on their skill. I have another guy that he works with the guards, but he's also what we call the blob and slob guy, the baseline out of bounds and the sideline out of bounds. He's responsible, and I give him full 100% authority over putting in all of our out of bounds plays. And we call that, similar to football here, we call that special teams, our special teams coach. So I have a guy that does that. So I have another guy that just works with our big guys in the posts. So he'll, before practice or in that 10-minute segment at the beginning and the end of practice, he'll work with our post guys. And he'll also do some zone stuff. So I'll give him the responsibility of making sure that he's working on any good zone sets that are out there or things that can work well for us. And then I have one more assistant that's pretty much, he works in the building with me, and he's like our equipment manager, but he's a great relationship guy. The kids love him. He's kind of one of those guys that the kids go to if they have a problem. They may not want to come to me to talk about it first. So he's kind of that bridge coach that the kids really feel comfortable with. And then, like I said, I have JV and freshman coaches that we kind of put with each other, and they have their own, we teach similar systems, but I give them as much freedom as I possibly can. Because once again, I want them to kind of develop as coaches. And I also want them to have freedom to be able to coach their teams the way they want to, as long as it's kind of within, a lot of the teachings that we do. So if our freshman teams don't have the players to run like the varsity team does, I tell my freshman coaches, then don't do it. Make sure you're teaching the footwork stuff. Make sure you're teaching them how to read screens. Make sure you're teaching them how to defend. Make sure you're teaching them our man-to-man principles, that type of stuff. But as far as set plays and as far as doing certain things, go ahead and do what you can and do what you want with those things, and just make sure that you're continuing to teach these guys and teach them the fundamentals of coming up with that. So one of the things that we've gotten into quite a bit at our school is the analytics. And Tim, who's on here, is awesome with that, and that's kind of what he's known for. So what Tim will do is he'll take our stats throughout the year and he'll break it down, and he'll do some comparisons with other teams, and he'll just go through all of this stuff. And then about 10 or 11 games into the season, he'll come to me with a report, and he'll tell me, like, this is what the analytics are saying. Like, hey, you got to shoot more threes, which Tim is all about. We got to play faster. We got to play slower. He'll even give me lineups, like these lineups are the best that are playing together. And then we'll do it again in another 5 games, like 15 or 16 games in. Tim will give me another report explaining, team-wise, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And then we'll do it again as we get into the playoffs, and just kind of, and trust me, I've used it quite a bit to where I adapt who I'm playing possibly, and some of our strategy about how we're playing, if it's going to make us more efficient in the way we're playing. So if guys had questions on the analytics, Tim's the guy to talk to, and he can definitely talk to you outside of this as well.
Yeah, I'm on the email, so feel free to email any stuff on that. And yeah, we've been fortunate in that we do have some resources. We use Huddle, which I'm guessing maybe a lot of you guys do. But even beyond that, we have a former player who's trying to start up his own sort of stats-based system. So we were able to kind of use him, and it's just sort of, allowed us to sort of analyze our team, probably in a way that's might seem like overkill on some levels, but is pretty in depth, and I think pretty beneficial. As a staff, what's nice is, and I'm sure you guys know, when you work with a group of people for seasons or even a season, you trust each other, you work hard, you know, you share in sort of the joy of the winning and even the pain of the losing. And that's part of the culture that I think we've built, which is fun and kind of satisfying in a new way every season, whether, you know, we've had success or failures in the past. So it's great to sort of be a part of. It's great to hear when people say things like, you know, Coach Flannery always has his team playing well in the playoffs and you guys peak at the right time and things like that. I think we all take pride in that, and Eric rightfully deserves the bulk of the credit for that. But it's those little victories that for us are pretty cool and make it fun. So we got a couple more technical questions in the chat that I'm gonna get to, and then maybe we'll get to our last question. And then it feels like our quarantine's never going to end, so maybe we can do this another time too, Edwin, if there's follow-ups and you guys for some reason want to come back and do this again. But two things, and they were both defensive related. One from Coach Marcos Pagan, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anybody's name. Can we talk about the coverage we use on ball screens? And we vary it up, so I'll let Coach Flannery talk about that. And Edwin Velez, Coach Edwin asked, what are your defensive principles? So that's more general, but just talk a little bit about defense, how we handle ball screens, which are prevalent, especially in the international game. I was watching some of our USA basketball stuff today and last night, and you see a lot of ball screens. So I think those are good questions and good technical questions.
Yeah, they're great, and we can talk about this stuff all day. I mean, defensive philosophy. Let's just start with that, because then I think I can go into ball screens with that. What you may not understand is we play with no shot clock. So you guys all play with the shot clock, correct? So my defensive philosophy would definitely change. And when I coach with USA basketball, it's definitely a little bit different than with my high school team. But so with my high school team, we are what I would consider ultra aggressive most of the time, depending on the players that we have. But we typically have the players that can get up, pressure the ball, deny one pass away, those types of things. Our philosophy is ball pressure is key always. We teach that constantly. Again, we actually have a call on our defense to where we go to a soft man, which would be more like a pack line that we kind of institute as the season goes on. It's not something that I ever start with during the season, because I always want our kids to come out and be as aggressive as they possibly can. And if I feel like they're not capable of being that aggressive, or you know, are they athletic enough to stay with some of the teams that we play, then we tend to be a little bit more soft in our approach defensively. The one thing that I've changed philosophically is defending from the top of the key when the ball's in the middle of the floor. We used to deny one pass away, so we would even deny a wing entry and have help from the backside. So if you're guarding the corner or guarding a post, you would be in help position. Where now we allow that entry into the wing and we deny the reversal back. So if I'm defending the point guard at the top and he passes the ball, my job is to deny him getting the ball back. So we'll front cutter. So if the point guard cuts to the rim, you got to stay between the ball and your man and deny him going to the rim. And we don't chase. So if the guy runs opposite the floor, we say in help position. So head on the rim kind of philosophy, where we just open up and we're in help position. But once the ball chooses a side, our philosophy is to keep the ball on that side of the floor. So if the ball goes to the wing, we're denying the reversal. We'll let the ball go to the corner. So if there's an offensive guy in the ball side corner, we'll allow that pass, but then we'll deny the wing back out. So we want the ball in our kids' head. Our ultimate goal defensively is to have the ball end up in the corner, and we're suffocating it there and keeping it there. So we take away the middle. Our help comes from the baseline typically. So we're overplaying the high side, because again, we feel, and I've always felt as a coach, if the ball gets in the middle of the floor, a player can do way more damage. You know, he can score, he can kick both sides, he can do a lot of different things. If we force the ball to the corner and we have help coming from the baseline, that's how we defend, and that's how we get out of it. Philosophically, we change every year. Like if we're going to be a pressing team, we're not always a pressing team. We'll play a half court man. If we play zone, we run a matchup zone. So we'll do a 1-1-3 matchup zone that I've done ever since Edwin's days, of basically man principles in a zone defense, which I think has always been very effective. And we typically save that as well to the end of the season. So I have different wrinkles come tournament time. We tend not to play a whole lot of zone during the season unless we're, completely outmatched physically, which happens a couple times. So that's kind of our defensive philosophy in general. Getting back to defending ball screens, I think I kind of mentioned it earlier. We teach pretty much every way to defend it. So we'll start off by teaching simply black, what we call black, which is switching a ball screen. We'll switch a ball screen. We'll hedge a ball screen, where we X out after we hedge. We'll blitz a ball screen, which is another term for doubling the ball screen. So we'll double. We'll jam a ball screen. So whenever the screener is there, we'll jam the screener, and the guy on the ball will go under. We'll ice a ball screen, which will isolate it and play on the high side and force it to the corner, which I think is the same as what people would say downing a ball screen. So we'll teach all of it. But typically in the course of a game, especially early in the season, we do a lot of simple switching, similar size, and hedging a ball screen, which is just kind of showing and then getting through or getting over top. So we try to teach our guys to get over top of the ball screen on the ball and stay with it, where the guy who's defending the screener, hedges or shows for a bit and then recovers back to his man. Those are the two main things that we do. We'll throw in the double balls, double the ball on just certain occasions when we want to speed up the game or try to get a turnover. The jamming the ball screen we use when we're going up against a guy that really is quick and maybe not a great shooter. We'll always go underneath the ball screen. Or when a team tends to do a lot of pick and roll, we'll definitely jam the ball screen, the screener, so he doesn't roll to the basket. But once again, we're teaching it all as the season goes on, and we're kind of getting into it. And we'll spend, if I'm guessing off the top of my head, in a week's, a 5-day practice week, we'll probably spend 15 or 20 minutes just on, not each day, but a total. So maybe 5-6 minutes a day on just working on defending a ball screen. And in the meantime, and at the same time, we'll be teaching how to, our guys offensively of how to come off the ball screen.
And I would say too, in especially with the group that we just had over the last couple of years, that are probably preferred way in pressure situations would be to do the switching on the ball screens. So especially playing with a shot clock, if you got into late game or late quarter situations, we would love to have the different options that you have, maybe with calls or varying defenses. But I think we had personnel that allowed us to switch 1 through 5. And as Coach Flannery mentioned, our general starting point would be to switch 1 through 4 and maybe have a different coverage for a center. If you have a good center who's good at kind of blocking off the paint, you might want to do more drop type coverages.
And with that, just so with USA basketball, we primarily teach the switch, and black is the call for our switch. And we typically down the ball screen or drop on the ball screen. So if a big is defending a guard, he'll just drop and the guard will work to get over. That's typically what we'll teach with USA basketball, and then we'll throw in a call here and there if we want to double to kind of pick up the pace or get a turnover. And we'll ice once in a while on the sideline, but we don't get into too much more detail. And in the limited time that we have our guys with the USA team, we try to be as limited. We don't want to throw 100 things at them, so we want to get really good at a certain amount of things and really try to pound it into our guys' head to do those right.
But I think, to sort of summarize too, the core defensive philosophy is ball pressure. Try to make an offense uncomfortable, and particularly when you're not playing without a shot clock, and we are envious that you guys have a shot clock, that that has to be a core philosophy for us, or else we just don't get into the type of games that we want to get into.
we are big proponents of the shot clock, but here in Ohio, we got a lot of old school dudes that just don't like change. So it's really hard to convince guys, and it's probably going to be a little while till we get one still, which is crazy.
Yeah, it'll happen, but yeah, hopefully before we have to retire, I guess.
Right.
you
Edwin, got a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one quick. It's not really a question. It's you've had the opportunity to coach internationally with a few tournaments, and what are the? I know that you've spoken in previous podcasts that I've heard. Can you compare? Obviously, the shot clock is one thing about high school basketball, but the FIBA rules is a lot different with the college NCAA rules. What are your likes and dislikes, if there is any, of FIBA basketball? And what would you see as a happy medium to use those rules as a universal rules so it can be played in all parts of the world? And obviously, the United States is one of the only parts that doesn't use the FIBA rules. But what did you like, don't like, and what rules would you like for it just to all merge